Companies mentioned herein are for illustrative purposes only, not intended as solicitation of the purchase of such securities, and do not constitute any investment advice or recommendation.
Hi, I'm Ulrich Vogtmann, and with me today is Edward Lees. Together, we're the co-CIOs of the Environmental Strategies Group here at BNP Paribas Asset Management. We're very excited to be hosting Plug Power as part of our Uncapped Impact series, a global end-to-end green hydrogen company that today have a pole position in contributing to the green hydrogen economy. The green hydrogen ecosystem is the fastest growing clean energy technology amongst those within the energy transition. Joining us today to talk about this in more detail is hydrogen industry leader Andy Marsh, President and CEO of Plug Power. Welcome, Andy, and thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Great to be with one of our great investors. Great to be able to talk about Plug, which I love talking about.
Fantastic.
I'd love to talk about the industry with you today.
With the insight that you have in the green hydrogen space and hydrogen space more broadly, what do you sort of see if you had to look into your sort of...
My crystal ball?
Your crystal ball.
So I think the important item is the availability to move large quantities of hydrogen. That's actually the key to the application. And I'll talk about some of the applications. There'll be applications for hydrogen that we won't even think about today, but when it becomes readily available. So the work that's being done by folks in Denmark to build a hydrogen pipeline to Central Europe. I was with Fingrid a couple weeks ago. They're looking to build a hydrogen pipeline. When hydrogen pipelines, and this will be what the world will be like in 10 years, are just like natural gas pipelines, where they're easily accessible. That's going to open up all sorts of applications, which really aren't on people's drawing boards today. It is clear most applications which use gray hydrogen today, 10 years from now, that'll be passé. That'll be green hydrogen. Green hydrogen also will take to replace anything which is, requires high temperature burning, which uses natural gas and oil today. Hydrogen will replace it. The interesting markets that for fuel cells actually have more to do with what does a future network look like? And you can envision future power networks where solar and wind are generating electricity for the grid. Hydrogen's being stored because if you have to provide over 8 hours of, and over a day of backup, batteries aren't going to cut it. Hydrogen will. And that hydrogen will be used to power stationary fuel cell products. We're beginning to work with SK on because they'll become the future peaker plants. Those peaker plants actually will exist, I think, in non-traditional places. I think they'll exist at Microsoft IT centers. I think they'll exist in microgrids. They're not going to be this big centralized activity. That's going to be different. I think the vehicle space is really interesting. When I talk to folks who are in the last mile delivery, they'll tell me 35% of the last mile will be some hybrid combination because of range and fast fueling. It's really a lot easier to move energy and gases in liquid form than electrical form. And if you want fast fueling, it has to be hydrogen. If you want to store a lot of energy, and it's even going to become more dense, we have work going on Plug. How do you store liquid hydrogen for Class 8 trucks, for long-range applications, which makes those trucks so much lighter and so much more range. We're doing that work. We bought a small company that has its roots at Washington State University, which is a leader in cryogenics. I think you'll see those vehicles on the road. I also believe more passenger vehicles will be a hybrid combination. I watched the evacuation of Florida during a hurricane, and I was sitting there and saying to myself, how in the world are they ever going to do that with batteries? And then I sit back and say, they're not. They really need to be hybrid vehicles so that you can have fueling stations where people can fill up just like gasoline today and really leverage the attributes of both. It's interesting. That's what Plug's really been doing for 15 years. Everything we've done is a hybrid. I think this argument, what's better, batteries or fuel cells, will go away, and there'll really be a combination of both to solve many, many problems. And then you talk to airplanes and all sorts of other areas. I think as the world becomes more electrified, as hydrogen becomes a substitute, people are going to figure out creative ways to think about how to use hydrogen, which nobody's talking about today.
And it was great to hear your perspective also about the difference between the US, Europe, and how Wall Street seems to play a bigger role in the US in particular. And that leads me to sort of the next question. What does Wall Street and the asset management industry, what role do you see that playing in clean energy and specifically for Plug Power, and what role has that played today?
To have investors who share the longer term vision in this industry and are not trading in and out every day is really beneficial. And the folks at BNP here, they've spent a great deal of time understanding Plug as well as the whole competitive environment, which I think is in the greater interest of folks who have a longer term view. And when you start thinking about the broader picture of asset management, we're building a lot of plants. We're going to build plants by ourselves. We're going to build plants with partners. We're going to build plants for partners. But asset management, the access to capital at a project level, is going to become a more and more critical part of Plug's business model. And they're the kind of partners we need both in Wall Street and, hopefully in Europe. I think it really matches well with the goals of European companies, European government policies, and American companies and policies.
Andy, we've heard a lot of great things from you today. And I thought I'd just end with some closing observations and then pass it over to you for some final thoughts. We first invested in Plug in 2019. And we saw a structural opportunity, I'd say, in the industry and indeed in Plug specifically. Now, back then, you were kind of a $250 million revenue company. This year, you'll likely do well in excess of $1 billion. You've talked about Plug hitting $5 billion in revenue by 2026. You're now in 5 continents. We've got eyes out for that 6th.
Yeah.
You're aiming to produce 2,000 tons per day of green hydrogen by 2030, I believe it is. And you've talked a lot about some of the different strategic partnerships you have. That's SK Group in Asia, or Renault and Acciona Energia here in Europe and in the US. Some of your clients are household names, Amazon and Walmart. So, you clearly have a big role to play in a number of things, including energy security, which is a big pressing issue around the world today. Is there any final thought from your side about what's top of mind for you, or what might you be focusing on the most over the next 12 months?
We're focused on today and also tomorrow. We're at the point where we've built these great factories. We've built these great sales channels. There's a path to being EBITDA positive, by the end of the year or early next year. There's a clear path to profitability. So probably half my job today is really making sure we execute to meet those needs, right? Because I fundamentally believe that will be another inflection point. On the other side, Ed, a year from now, we're going to have demonstrated that. The questions are going to be much more future-oriented. And I spent a good deal of time on the future. I think you look at the deal we did in Finland, which, as we execute, that will represent 5% of Europe's energy goals by 2030 for hydrogen. That's a big deal. You know, we talk about the effect that when we make more hydrogen and sell more hydrogen, it actually accelerates our fuel cell products. I almost think about hydrogen as what drives the growth of this fuel cell industry. As you do these industrial applications, it will really make the mobility and stationary products hydrogen lower cost, which will make them more competitive. And then when I look at the broader world, maybe a little parochial, I don't see anyone else in the industry that has such a broad portfolio and hands in so many sectors of the hydrogen economy. A lot of people ask me, you know, I was at a White House meeting where one of the senior White House individuals, you know, at the end of the meeting, I said to him, there's going to be a lot of people come in to talk to you about hydrogen, and that they're going to give you their opinions, but they haven't done anything. And he turned to me and said, Andy, there's not going to be a lot of meetings in the White House because I wanted to speak with you because Plug is the company that's doing real things today and building out the hydrogen economy. And that really becomes the baseline as I tell my employees every week on my all-employee meeting, our goal was to be a dominant player in this hydrogen industry, not today, where we are, but for the decades to come. And that's really what I would like to leave the folks with today.
Andy, that is great. It's great to hear your focus combined with that potential looking out. And I just want to say that from both me and from Ulrich, from our entire Environmental Strategies Group team, and indeed the broader BNP Paribas group, thank you so much for coming today.
It was a pleasure to be here today. It's always great to be in London.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Bye.